Welcome to Chanel World Story 22, Chanel that always presents news about the history of countries in the world. On this occasion, Chanel World Story 22 will discuss about the system of sexual slavery carried out by the Japanese army against women in China. Many Chinese women were made sex slaves by the Japanese soldiers. Then how about the next story of sex slavery done by the Japanese army? Before proceeding to the discussion, please support by subscribing, so that we can still be kind to each other. Japan is a country that once practiced sexual slavery when it colonized Indonesia in 1942 to 1945. At that time many Indonesian women were later used as Ianfu. Objects of sexual slavery by the Japanese soldiers. Ianfu is not a prostitute, but a brutal practice of sexual slavery. The paternalistic Japanese state encouraged the practice methodology of the sexual slavery system to be implemented and built. The inhumane practice of Ianfu is rooted in discrimination of gender, race and ethnicity, and is driven by systematic imbalances in the international economy and the commodity of women's bodies. To get recognition about the atrocities that the Japanese government had committed to treat women as sexual slaves is not an easy thing, because even getting recognition from the Indonesian government is difficult. Beyond a winding road. It is estimated that 200 to 400,000 Asian women aged 13 to 25 years who at that time had become Ianfu. Let's look at this Ianfu practice in Indonesia. The horror of death in 6 weeks at that time had been spread by the Japanese army at that time to slaughter and rape around 20,000 Chinese women of all ages. Iris Chang, 1997. Explained that many Japanese military personnel were not satisfied with just raping. They carried out brutal acts of torture beyond human reason before killing the helpless victims, until the samurai swords used for slaughter became dull because they were used to cut off hundreds of human heads every day. This resulted in madness among them, as well as contracting a sexually transmitted disease that attacked the Japanese army. Of course, this weakened Japan's military power in its efforts to conquer mainland China in 1937. This situation made military officials panic, until a military doctor, Aso Tetsuo, was sent by the military headquarters in Tokyo to investigate the cause of the weakening of his war troops. Aso Tetsuo wrote an article in 1939 that was published in Shanghai Kara Shanghai He. From Shanghai to Shanghai, with the writing title Karubio no Sekiokateki Yoboho. Positive Prevention of Sexually Transmitted Diseases. p. 214 to 230. It was recommended that the Japanese military provide clean women, who were placed in special locations to satisfy the sexual needs of the Japanese military. In a popular Japanese term, public toilet. Not long after the recommendations were issued, the army, Rikugan, took anticipatory action. Namely, soldiers who contracted venereal diseases were not allowed to return to Japan until they recovered. To prevent venereal disease from spreading to Japan, the Japanese military provided clean women to the soldiers, so they do not relate to just any woman. This recommendation marked the start of the large-scale recruitment of women in the Asia-Pacific region and the Netherlands, known as Jugan Ianfu. This term comes from Japanese, which means Ju equals join, gun equals military, Ian equals woman, Fu equals entertainer, become an entertainer who joins the military. This literal meaning is incorrect because it embodies the actual meaning, namely the practice of a system of sexual slavery. This is reinforced by the statement of the UN Special Rapporteur Radhika Kumaraswamy in her report for the Commission on Human Rights in 1996, stating that the term comfort women does not refer to the suffering caused by repeated rape over the years. For this reason, the term sexual slave is the right and appropriate term. In 2004, the International Solidarity Conference demanding settlement of Japan's past was held in South Korea, where it was agreed that the term Jugan Ianfu would become Ianfu accompanied by two quotation marks. Namely, Ianfu. The quotation marks are used to give the meaning of being a sex slave. This term is then used internationally. Next I will use the term Ianfu. The issue of Ianfu was exposed to the international public. December 6, 1991. On the 50th anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attack in Seoul, South Korea, Kim Hak-soon, 68 years, publicly stated that he was a victim of Ianfu. The loudness of her testimony had a global influence to encourage survivors from various countries that were once colonized by Japan to open their voices, including Indonesia. During the 1931-1942 Asia-Pacific War, around 200,000 women in Asia-Pacific, such as Indonesia, Timor-Leste, Malaysia, the Philippines, Taiwan, Korea, Japan and the Netherlands were forced to become sex slaves by the Japanese military. They were held in various Japanese military brothels called Ianjo, which were scattered in various regions in Asia Pacific. Lepa Mlajenovic, a trauma psychologist from Serbia, argued in the Women's International War Crime Tribunal on Japan's military sexual slavery in Tokyo in 2000, stating that the trauma caused by the Ianfu system is permanent and for life. Mlajenovic added that in the post-war period, they were forced to live in poverty due to limited economic access. Their school years and youth have been seized and destroyed by the Japanese military. As a result, they experience a gloomy life throughout their lives. After the war, most of those who survived were not informed about the defeat by the Japanese military. They were slaughtered by being pushed into defensive trenches or caves and executed with samurai's words. Some others were bombed or shot dead. They must die because they are living proof of the crimes of the Japanese military. Those who survived returned home still unable to overcome the bitter and bad memories of the systematic rape they had experienced. All survivors keep a meeting of bitter experiences and keep the shame alone throughout their lives in silence. Bitter Tales of Ianfu.